Hi again, everybody. Here's an interesting little game that was played in 1910 with Robbins with the white pieces and Showalter with the black, and it's a two knights defense. And it starts out e4, e5, bishop c4, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6. Now white plays the knight up to g5, and the f7 square is now attacked twice. So black plays the pawn up to d5. White captures that pawn with his e-pawn. Now black swings his knight out to a5, hitting at the bishop. So white checks with the bishop at b5. Black blocks with the pawn at c6. White captures the pawn at c6 with his d-pawn, and black recaptures with his b-pawn, hitting at the bishop, so white retreats the bishop back to e2. Now black goes ahead and hits at the knight with this pawn to h6, so white retreats the knight back to f3. Black goes ahead and hits at the knight again with the pawn to e4, and white moves his knight up to e5. Now black moves his queen to d4, hitting at the knight yet again. So white moves the knight over to g4. Now black goes ahead and takes off the knight with his bishop from c8, and white recaptures with his own bishop. Now black makes a nice little move. He moves his e-pawn up to e3. So that now that there's a double attack on the bishop at g4 from the queen and the knight at f6, and he's also threatening to capture the pawn at f2 with check. So the only way to meet both threats is to play the f-pawn up to f3. Now black goes ahead and hits at the bishop again with the pawn to h5, and white retreats the bishop to h3. And now black swings his queen over to h4 with check. Now obviously white cannot block the check with the pawn to g3, because then black would just capture the unprotected bishop at h3. And of course white certainly cannot move the king over to f1, because then black would just play queen to f2, checkmate. So the only move that white really has is to move the king up to e2. Now black comes in with the queen at f2 with check, and white has to move the king to d3. Now black swings the rook over from a8 to d8 with check, and white moves the king over to c3. Now black makes another nice little move. He moves the e-pawn up to e2 with a double threat, obviously threatening to capture the white queen, but also threatening to play his own queen to d4, and that would be checkmate. And the only way white can parry both threats is to move his queen over to g1. And now black takes the knight at f6 and moves it to d5 with check, and white has to move the king over to d3. And now black goes ahead and plays the same knight up to e3 with a discovered check from his rook at d8, and white moves the king back to c3. And that brings us to the challenge to the viewer. If you'd like to pause the video now and see if you can find black's next move, I'll wait for you. Black now has a mate in 3, which he starts out by capturing the white queen at g1. And after white recaptures the queen with the rook, black now plays the knight to d1, check. And the only move white has to get out of check is to capture the knight with the rook. And black now ends the game by capturing the rook and under-promoting to a knight. Checkmate. Nice little way of ending the game there at the end. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.